This is Bob from BBD from my studio here in Delhi in Defense Colony, and the topic of discussion obviously continues to be the confusion caused or being created by media about what Rajnath Singh said or didn't say, or the conflict that exists between what the Ministry of External Affairs is saying, what the Home Ministry said earlier, what the Defense Minister said the last 2 days, and you could see it in NDTV yesterday had 4 or 5 or 6 gentlemen and a lady that they interviewed, and you could see the confusion listening to all of them. Right? You had I think that lady's name was Suhasini Haider and KC Singh, which were talking about how the External Affairs Ministry was not dealing with it properly. And one of the things which I found strange, I think Suhasini Haider said that, one of the Foreign Ministry spokesmen, basically when asked whether the relationship with China had deteriorated, it said no. Well, that's kind of really strange. I haven't picked that up anywhere, right? All the statements I have heard from the EAM, to his credit, have basically said that the relationship cannot be the same again unless status quo ante, or I'm assuming a pre-April position is established. At least that's what it seems that he's saying, right? It's kind of confusing. The defense, obviously, then there is Professor Ambassador Kachu, who actually, what he brought out was, which I thought was an important point, that once the red lines were established by the Prime Minister when he said that no intrusion by the Chinese had happened into the Indian border, there was nobody sitting inside on the Indian territory, which, as you remember, the China caught on and tom-tommed it all over the place, that India admitted that they were on the wrong. Since then, it just seems that all these 2-3 ministries are working, trying to figure out what to say and how to say it without refuting the Prime Minister, who obviously, historically, you really can't say anything different than what he said. So maybe it was a benchmark that was established there at that point of time, which kind of took us as not taking us in the slippery slope. Some people thought that, is this something that's planned? Is this something that's out of design? The more you look at it, absolutely not. But what both the people from the armed forces, which is Lieutenant General Hussain and Colonel Shukla, were very clear about facts on the ground. The facts on the ground suggest something very different than what the External Affairs Ministry is saying. The facts on the ground are essentially that all the necessary moves, whether it is a Quad move, whether it is the move to the way we've beefed up our borders, definitely suggests that we are not taking this lying down, and neither are we taking the fact that while some analysts have really not laid much credence by the fact that we have outflanked them in Despang by taking up those 2 heights on the Kailash range. I think that has a far greater role and shows intent on the ground, irrespective of what the different ministries are saying. And I think that different ministries are saying different things, and the problem, I think, with the External Affairs Minister is that he doesn't have a political biodata. He doesn't have any political backing. So I guess he is more like a tree caught in a huge wind, where it's difficult for him at this point of time, I think, to be able to take strong and hard decisions against China. And also, something tells me that maybe there is some power struggle within the Indian government too. You can't put that beyond it right now, especially with the actors involved here. However, let's just say, I think that I am happier seeing what's on the ground, not so happy about what's being said by the External Affairs Ministry, because they continue to waffle a bit, right? But here, look at what Brahma Chalani says. He puts it right on the line. He says, on China, India is making a mistake. Successive governments have put more faith in diplomacy than armed forces in achieving security objectives. Diplomacy can accomplish little in the absence of strategic vision. And that's actually a really, really important point. Our strategic vision is extremely limited, right? And again, it's not in our DNA, right? Then he says, one reason history repeats itself is that virtually every prime minister, although unschooled in national security at the time of assuming office, has sought to reinvent the foreign policy wheel rather than learn from past blunders. And I think in this particular case, even more so, because of the outreach to Xi without understanding Xi or the Communist Party of Chinese Communist Party. Then you have has sought to then he goes ahead and says another reason is that intellectuals and journalists shrink from closely scrutinizing foreign policy moves. Overselling outcomes of summits meeting with China from 88 to 2019 for leadership glorification has led to India's worst China crisis after 1962 war. Okay. Now he says, now India admits China has trashed all those agreements with its aggression, yet India still plays into China's hands by clinging to the records and accords, and by agreeing recently in Moscow to build on them through new confidence building measures. China is showing it is a master in protracting negotiations to buy time to consolidate its territorial gains while exploring the limits of its adversaries' flexibility and testing its patience. Meeting China halfway will validate its 10-mile forward, 5-mile back strategy, with China gaining half but India losing half. Yet India has placed its faith in diplomacy ever since it discovered China's intrusion in early May. Then he makes a point. China used talks to make additional encroachments, especially on the critical Despang-Y junction, which controls access to several key areas. Then he says, the Moscow agreement's use of the vague term border areas helps obscure China's encroachments and create space for more Chinese salami slicing. Diplomacy, this is what about. Diplomacy is unlikely to deliver the status quo anti-India seeks. In fact, China seems intent on continuing below the threshold of armed conflict, coercive military pressure along the entire frontier until India acquiesces to its demands, including reconciling to the new status quo. Here I am a little at a difference from Brahmacharani. I think the patience is going to play more on the Chinese because their soldiers are going to have a far more difficult time than Indian soldiers holding on to those heights. Here's the point. Then we should also be looking at what the world is saying, right? China's great power play puts Asia on edge and risks flare-ups with US. Beijing assertiveness blamed on domestic insecurity, Xi ambitions and pandemic opportunism. Now what this article writes is, China's aim to boost its global power has been telegraphed repeatedly by Mr. Xi in 2017. He summarized the country's progress since the 1949 revolution with the phrase, China has stood up, grown rich, become strong, and is moving towards center stage. And that's the intent. Now what is more important here is where Gautam Bambawale, a former Indian ambassador to China, said that a brawl on the country's Himalayan border with China in June that killed 21 Indian soldiers followed the PLA's deployment of tens of thousands of troops and heavy equipment to the area. It was not an accidental meeting, he said. It was a well thought out, premeditated plan by the PLA. What they are also signaling at a strategic level is that China is risen, and you have to accept that China is the preeminent power in Asia. That's it, guys. And so is Pakistan in the same breath, right? And it says China is the preeminent power in Asia, and you better understand your place in this hierarchy. They are saying that 21st century isn't an Asian century. It is merely and solely a Chinese century. Then it goes on to say that Beijing viewed India's infrastructure build-up in the Galwan Valley as a serious offense that required firm response. In the Chinese perspective, if they do not punish severely enough, it's going to leave a mentality of possibility, she said. Punishment must be seriously comprehended and lessons absorbed. And this is what they're doing, folks. And as you can see, nothing has really changed. Rahul Singh says, India asserts right to patrol friction points, right? Then you have somebody in the Indian Express, right? China's words and actions don't match. No power can stop patrolling at LAC Rajna. Yeah, well, that's okay, but are we getting to status quo ante where we were doing so before, right? Then it says, Harinder Bajwa writes, LAC to LOC, Indian Army on alert. The LOC is witnessing 300 to 400 violations every single month. Pakistan is in big play with China. Let us not take the eyes off both. It's never going to be one alone. It's going to be both of them together. Then it says ball in Beijing's court, MEA on parlays. What I didn't like about is the statement in this. India on Thursday pushed back against China's efforts to deflect responsibility for delays in the disengagement process in Ladakh sector, saying Beijing should sincerely work for de-escalation and not make further attempts to unilaterally alter the status quo of the line of actual. So the operative words is here, which is bothersome. Further attempts. Are we accepting the attempts that have already happened? I think that's dangerous terminology. Dangerous words that have been used by the Ministry of External Affairs, right? Then you have Sachin Prasha, right? Both must focus on easing tension, India tells China. The Chinese foreign ministers said again on the Thursday that it was imperative for India to correct its mistakes. So while we continue to do that, they are calling it our mistakes. Disengaging quick on the ground and take concrete action to ease border situation, right? Then what is disconcerting is India, China, NSA use BRIC platform to keep going. I always worry about this champ, folks. I am just not comfortable with this NSA champ. Because I am not sure this is going to get, knowing anybody personally at this stage, is only going to lead us down a very slippery slope. And it is going to be used by the Chinese counterpart, which our NSA is not going to be able to use, right? Then you have another stuff that's happening as US official visits Taiwan, China warns of consequences. The Taiwanese foreign ministry said that envoy Keith Cratch, Undersecretary for Economic Growth, Energy and the Environment, was the highest level official from the State Department to visit the island in decades. So the pressure globally is on. Then he says, Mr. Cratch visit on Wednesday by sending 2 anti-submarine aircraft into the island air defense identification zone, according to the Taiwanese Defense Ministry. While they were doing this, the US too has also increased the transit of American warships through the Taiwan Strait. So things could go bad there too, folks. It is not an easy thing for China right now. They've got almost everything 60% focused on the Taiwanese side, and they have very few resources to come here. And the other thing, what Brahma Chelani said, that they're using this time to reinforce. I personally think that the reinforcement has reached its limit. This is it. It's not going to get any worse. Take my word for it. Everything suggests that. But then, geostrategically, we make some stupid mistakes. We've banned export of onions again. And our biggest strategic partner of the region, Bangladesh, says, deeply concerned by onion export ban Bangladesh to India. Please, guys, let's grow up. Let's do selective banning. This caused a problem earlier. The only guy fully on our side in our neighborhood currently is Bangladesh. And we continue to misbehave with our rhetoric for anti-Muslim rhetoric within the country, and with all this banning of onions of all things. Why don't we just grow up and smell the coffee for a while, right? At the same time, Pakistan has played the Jammu and Kashmir game with us too. On the other side, Pak to elevate Gilgit-Baltistan to full-fledged province report. I think that is really funny, folks. And I must say that this is a payback time for us. Let's see what we do about it. Then, I had a really crazy stuff. It says Dr. Reddy seals deal with Russia. Yesterday, we had one, I think Rajdeep said this, I go on to the guy who actually is doing this development of this from the other side, talking about Russia, India, bye-bye. Russia, India, bye-bye. This is the tinted, emotional outpouring by some of our anchors that really takes the cake, folks. We need to correct that. Russia needs us as much, in fact more. They don't have the production capacity. They don't have the kind of material we have and the expertise we have for production, folks. They need us. Forget this Russia, India, bye-bye. You don't even know whether Sputnik is going to work. Jai Hind.